Welcome to the ANTIGEL Shootout of 2023. In this video, we're going to look at Stanadyne, HotShot's secret, House, this cheap stuff off eBay, and we'll throw in a little bit of 2-stroke oil from Walmart as well. Shout out to T-Bone Truck Stop of Columbus, Nebraska for providing the straight number 2 diesel, as well as the number 1 diesel that we'll be using in this test. We're going to be looking at 2 different tests, one around 0 degrees, another around -15 degrees. We're going to look at how these perform when added to straight number 2. We're going to do a cost breakdown. We're going to look at some number 1 diesel as an alternative. So for the first test, it was between 0 and -4 degrees Fahrenheit. I started by taking empty water bottles and drying those out. If you've never done this before and you need to use them for something, the best trick is to shake out all the water possible, then wrap up a paper towel in a thin strip, insert that, invert the bottle, and a couple hours later you'll have a perfectly dry bottle. So there's no water in the bottles, they're completely clean and free of water. Then I took the additives, I got some pipettes, some plastic pipettes. We added all the additive per the labels on the bottles using the pipettes, and used a different pipette for each additive so there was no cross-contamination. Once the bottles were mixed up, they got thoroughly shaken and set outside in a cart, as you can see. So here are some before and after pictures at the 0 degree test. You can see how clear the diesel is in the bottles inside at room temperature, and then you can see in the cart the differences once they get down to 0 degrees. And you can see how confusing the test results were for me, because in this picture you can see the number 2 is actually looking clearer than pretty much all the bottles that have additive in them. Alright, so here's straight number 2 coming out. It's pouring out cleanly. There are no globs in the bottom of the number 2. Here's the eBay stuff. Poured out cleanly. The HotShot's has a giant glob in the bottom. Now this top stuff coming out is clear, but wait till we get to the bottom here. Now it's white and murky. It's like it separates it. So if that settles to the bottom of your tank and your draw tube is at the bottom of your tank, then I would imagine you would suck all that white murky stuff up, which would be bad. This one's housed above 0. This one's housed below 0. I see 0 difference. I'm going to shake this up just to simulate if this was in a tank and you had your return agitating the fuel in the tank. We'll pour this one, see how it comes out. And we'll compare it to this without agitating it. So it appears that if it's agitated, it'll flow easier than if it's sitting. So you might have issues during initial startup trying to get that stuff to flow out. I'm not going to pour out our mixtures with number 1 because they're still clear. We can tell they are good. Here's the Stanadyne. It's a little murkier at the top than the House and the HotShot's. Here is just plain old 2-stroke. There's some noticeable gel at the bottom of that one. And then last but not least, 2-stroke with House above 0 mixture. This is very cloudy. So what did we learn with our mixture sitting outside at 0 degrees? Nothing that I can discern from pouring it out of a bottle into a bucket. Everything's still poured. All right, so that was the 0 to -4 degree test. And then thankfully we had a nice cold day coming up. It's gonna be -15. I realized after the first test that bringing the bottles inside really just lends to skewing the results. I watched a lot of videos, read a lot of forums. People would get their diesel down to -20 to -40, but then they'd bring it inside and they'd let it sit there for up to 20 or 30 minutes and let that come up to ambient room temperature, and that really skews the results. So for the second test, I decided, regardless of the wind noise, we can battle through that. It's better to look at all of this at -15 degrees. All right, it's -15 degrees. Got 29 mile/hour wind, which makes it a wind chill of like -44. So the temperature's not that bad, but the wind really makes it suck. So I gotta hurry up and do this quick. So here is our straight number 2, supposedly. It's still liquid, which makes me believe there's some additive in this, because this should be a solid brick. But it's completely clouded up, so we'll pour it out. I think that's pouring way too easily for being straight number 2. Looking in the bucket though, it's looking pretty gelatinous. I'm trying to go from worst to best here. So this eBay stuff that I thought I was getting a great deal with, when I turned this upside down first thing this morning, it didn't move. It was solid. There's clumps coming out of here. It just had a very white look to what was coming out the entire time. So I would rank that at the bottom. Then I think it's going to be Stanadyne is next. I don't see any big globs in it, but the entire bottle is white. I'd really like to pour this through a filter, but I just don't know what size of filter media I would need. Next I want to look at HotShot's. This isn't necessarily the next one in line, but I want to do the House back to back. And so this one, I'm trying to see if there's any liquid, like clear gold liquid at the top at all. I definitely see more white at the bottom and more clear gold at the top. And then here is our House above 0. So this should not pass. This is only rated for 0 degrees Fahrenheit and above, but it is clear at the top. There you can see that wind jumping up at us. Lovely. Definitely a big blob of white at the very bottom. And then comparatively, here's our House below 0. And this is definitely clear at the top. I don't know if you can see that, but there's a very solid cloud of white at the bottom. Just 2-stroke oil with straight number 2. So this should be gelled up. It didn't seem to affect anything. This is what I've been running for the last 10 years, 2-stroke with House above 0, and I can see the wax separated out. It's clear at the top, lots of white stuff at the bottom. So that looks like it's been working, and I haven't ever gelled up with House. So then here's pure number 1, and it's awesome. Totally liquid, pours out like water. Not -15 degree water, but you know, liquid water. It's awesome. And then here is half and half, number 1, number 2, and there's some clouding finally occurring at the bottom. But even at -7 degrees, it was still crystal clear. So I got to get inside because I'm freezing. So after the negative 15-degree test, I still wasn't satisfied that the number 2 poured straight out as a pure liquid. So I left another bottle outside overnight. I ran outside and the bottle was completely solid. I brought it in to try to pour it out and get it on camera. So real quickly, here's pure number 2, and as you can see, it's all but completely solid. It's hard to bring this inside without it thawing down. Bring it inside where it's 75 degrees and warms up pretty quickly. So looking at our mixtures, these 3 are 1 gallon additive to 1,000 gallons of diesel. That makes the division really easy. You just divide your gallons by 1,000, or simpler yet, take the gallons that you put in your tank that day, move the decimal over 3 spots to the left, then convert that to ounces. That's how many ounces you got to pour into your tank. Super simple math. The house, that has 2 different rates. There's a rate above 0 degrees Fahrenheit, and then it's double the dose below 0 degrees Fahrenheit. The 2-stroke oil, I put in 1 ounce per 1.5 gallons of diesel. Now I have seen this separate out, so if you leave something sit for a long time, I've seen a lot of white to blue smoke coming out of the tailpipe if you put too much of this in. I've seen a lot higher mixture rates for this online. I would not feel comfortable running more than the 1 ounce per 1.5 gallons of diesel. For these 3, there's no difference above or below 0. It just says they will work proportionally and you can't add too much. They don't have actual specific gel points, like here it's going to be good down to negative 40. The Stanadyne says it improves your pour point by 40 degrees Fahrenheit. You don't know where your pour point's starting at though. The house actually says pours and handles down to negative 20 degrees. So what were the results of the test that I could conclude? I really don't know what the difference is between that white cloud forming at the bottom and the top portion of the bottle staying clear versus the entire bottle looking murky. Like I noted during the test, if that white cloud's at the bottom of your tank in the morning when you start your truck and your pickup tube's sucking from the bottom, it's obviously going to pull all that white murky stuff through first. So I would think that would be bad. Throughout this test, everything poured other than the couple times I went outside and found the eBay stuff and the straight number 2 to be solid in the bottles. That was really what I was looking forward to, was finding some of these having a solid ice cube of diesel in the bottle. So with that being said, I think technically everything except for the eBay stuff passed the test of preventing your diesel from gelling. However, the HotShot's and the House are the only 2 things that I'll use moving forward. The eBay stuff obviously failed, and the Stanadyne was somewhat on the fence, and being that this is one of the most expensive things you can put in, I would sooner run number 1 instead of the Stanadyne additive. I also feel that the results were skewed because our straight number 2 wasn't a true straight number 2. It likely had additives put in it at some point. The only other thing I could think of to make this test more definitive is to pour our samples through a filter and then take a specific weight to see how many solids were collected. Looking at the bottles that were cloudy throughout, from what I could find in other videos and reading through forums, if you could hold that wax fall out in suspension, so there's not one big glob right at the bottom, if it's mixed up, as you'd say, with all the diesel, you could run that through your filter, whereas if it falls to the bottom and you suck just pure wax up all at once, that's when you're gonna gel up your filter. That's just my take on it. Now, the bottles that have the big white glob at the bottom, again, like the House, I've never gelled up with it, so I don't know what that means. All right, looking at cost breakdown of additives, we're gonna look at this in terms of dollars per gallon of diesel that the additive will cost you. So the Stanadyne is 7.2 cents per gallon, which is by far the highest. The house is 6.2 cents per gallon, and that's considering the below zero double dose rating. Our HotShot's comes in just below that at 5.9 cents per gallon, and the eBay is by far the cheapest at 2.9 cents per gallon. You don't necessarily get what you pay for, because the Stanadyne was second to last, but the cheapest, the eBay, was definitely last place, being the cheapest. Now, if you're wondering why I chose this, there's a tiny number here on the bottom. That model number actually matches the model number of the HotShot's. And when I was looking for the absolute best price on all of these additives, so I could give you this cost breakdown, I found this. This result came up on eBay, and I had a feeling this was actually just an unmarked, unlabeled version of this. Digging into it, looking through the SDS sheets and everything, this is made at a totally different facility than the HotShot stuff. They're definitely not the same. I don't know why that number is on there and matches this. I guess it's just a coincidence. The other thing you need to look at is availability. I can find House anywhere. I can only find Stanadyne online. Obviously, this stuff only comes from eBay. I've seen a lot of HotShot secret chemicals at Menards, but oddly enough, they don't carry the ANTIGEL additive. This is actually the cheapest on Summit Racing, and this is going to be the cheapest at Menards when they have their bag sale in January, and you can get 15% off. One more thing I'd like to note is this is by far the best bottle. You take the cap off, you squeeze on the bottom, and it pushes the liquid up into this measuring device, and this fits every fuel tank door that I have tried it on. Whereas a lot of these, if you're trying to pour these into your fuel tank straight out of the jug, it's really hard. I also bought this chemical mixing container where I can pour my additive into the bulk portion in the bottom, put the cap on, turn it upside down, then it measures it out here up to 6 ounces. You can take this off and pour it out, but this doesn't fit into fuel doors as easily as this. This is a superb bottle. HotShot's really did their homework looking at what bottle to use for their additive, because let's be frank, how the hell are you going to measure this stuff out down to the ounce when you're outside? It's negative 10 degrees and all you have is a giant bottle like this. This one has a mark at the middle saying that's half. This isn't even translucent. You can't see how much is in there or how much you've used at all, so you're totally guessing with this. You don't want to be guessing when you're paying 7 cents a gallon for additive. So love this. Great job, HotShot Secret. So what do I give the thumbs up to and what do I give the thumbs down to? These two walk away with the victory. These two I'll burn up above zero so I can use them up, but I'll never buy them again. And I'm going to keep using my 2-stroke additive because I don't see any downside to it. There's a paper that somebody did about 15 years ago or so, where it shows this actually adds quite a bit of lubricity that's lost. Not because the sulfur is removed from the diesel now, but because the process that removes the sulfur, the process itself removes that lubricity. So I like to use this on all of my older mechanical diesels that were designed before ULSD came out. But hold on a second, I still haven't talked about #1 diesel, which is a clear winner of this entire test, pouring out like liquid water all the way down to negative 15 degrees. How does it rack up against the additives, and why wouldn't you want to run that? There are several factors that go into it. #1 is going to be availability. Out of roughly 14 stations around me, I think only 5 or 6 of them carry #1 diesel. And out of those, some of them only carry pre-blended #1, #2 mixtures. So you can't choose how much #1 you put in your tank. Stacking it up against the cost of these, right now it's about $1 a gallon more than straight #2. So you cut that in half to get your price per gallon. It's about 50 cents per gallon and this being the most expensive at 7.2 cents, it's really not worth it from a cost standpoint unless that cost differential is about 20 cents higher per gallon, and you're never going to find it for just 20 cents higher a gallon. It's always going to be quite a bit more. It's definitely the safest option you can run. Why wouldn't you just run straight number one all the time? You get less power and less mileage because there's less energy content there. It's better to run a blend. I've seen blends of 30, 40, and 50% number one. I'm not gonna go out and test what's what. If it's gonna be below zero, I'll usually just go try to put number one in the tank because I know it's not gonna gel up on me. I really only like to run additives with number two solely down to 0 degrees. It doesn't really get below zero here that often, but if I go on a long trip and it's gonna be below zero on that trip, I'll try to just run number one. So in a perfect world, yes, you'd run number one as your additive and you'd go out and you'd play with your dilution percentages. But due to the minimal days we have below zero, the high cost, reduced power and mileage, I'll stick to my additives. And just as a side note, I joined a Canadian group on Facebook to get their take on it, and even they, where they have temperatures commonly between -10 and -30 Fahrenheit, still run number two with additives a lot of the time. So thanks for sticking around and watching this whole thing. Hope I save you some money. Hope I prevent you from gelling up. Drop a comment below of what you thought, and safe travels.